yourself for lies.
I work in logistics for a regional medical supply company. It's not glamorous, but it's dependable. I manage delivery routes, coordinate with hospitals and vendors, troubleshoot shortages before they become crises. When something goes wrong, it's my phone that rings. I like that. I like being useful. I like knowing where I stand. I've been there almost 8 years, long enough that my name is shorthand in meetings, long enough that people trust me to keep things moving. My wife teaches yoga and wellness classes, studios during the week, retreats on the weekends, online sessions whenever she feels like it. Her schedule is fluid, elastic. Mine is fixed, predictable. For a long time, that worked. She brought spontaneity into my life. I brought structure into hers. We used to joke that I anchored her, and she reminded me to breathe. We'd been married 5 years, together almost 9. Long enough that friends stopped checking in on us and just assumed we were fine. Long enough that family referred to us as an example. We did too. We had routines, Sunday grocery runs, Thursday takeout, quiet mornings where we barely spoke but felt connected anyway. Until Mark showed back up. She mentioned him casually one night while we were eating takeout on the couch, pad thai cooling between us, the TV murmuring in the background. "I ran into Mark after class today," she said, eyes still on the screen. She said it the way you mentioned running into an old neighbor. No build-up, no warning. Mark was her college boyfriend, 3 years together, lived in the same apartment. The one she used to wave away with a laugh when we first started dating. A phase, she'd called him. I was young. "Oh," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How is he?" She shrugged, finally reaching for her food. "Same Mark, still charming, still dramatic." I waited for more. There wasn't any. "That's nice," I said. That was it, or so I thought. A few days later, she mentioned him again, then again the following week. Little updates slipped into conversation like background noise. Mark recommended that new cafe near the studio. Mark still hates mornings. Mark says the city hasn't changed at all. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into walks after her evening classes. She started coming home later, shoes in hand, hair pulled loose like she'd just finished laughing. I noticed her phone lighting up more, not the quick glance and dismiss kind of notifications, long ones, the kind that made her smile to herself. She'd tilt the screen slightly away from me without realizing she was doing it, a reflex, not a decision. That bothered me more than if it had been intentional. One night, we were sitting at opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling wider than it should have. Her phone buzzed. She smiled. I swallowed. "Are you talking to Mark a lot?" She didn't look up. Her thumbs kept moving. "We're catching up." "How much is catching up?" She sighed, finally locking the screen and setting the phone face down on her thigh. "Why does it matter?" "Because you're not here," I thought. "Because you're laughing at someone else while sitting next to me. Because I feel like a background character in my own marriage." But what I said was, "Because he's your ex." She looked at me then, not surprised, annoyed, like I'd interrupted her thought process. "And?" she said. "And it makes me uncomfortable." She laughed, not nervous, not apologetic, a short, dismissive sound. "That sounds like a you problem." The words hung there longer than they should have. I nodded slowly, trying to process the way she'd said it. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I didn't realize," just a verdict, case closed. That was the first crack. Not the fight, not even the laughter. The certainty with which she decided my discomfort didn't matter. A week later, I tried again. Not in the heat of the moment, not after catching her smiling at her phone. I waited until a quiet evening, after dinner, when the house felt neutral, Dishes done, TV off, no distractions to hide behind. "I'm not asking you to cut him off," I said carefully. "I'm asking you to set some boundaries." She folded her arms across her chest, a familiar defensive posture. "I'm not going to shrink my life because you're insecure." There it was again, that word, insecure, tossed out like a diagnosis, like it explained everything away, like it turned my concern into a character flaw. "I trust you," I said, keeping my voice level, "but I don't trust situations that blur lines." She leaned back against the counter, unimpressed. "You don't get to manage my friendships." I nodded once. "Then I guess neither of us does." Her brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've had boundaries I kept out of respect for you," I said. "Maybe it's time I stopped doing that." She stared at me, clearly expecting more. An explanation, a walkback, a reassurance that I wasn't serious. I didn't offer one. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. She shook her head with a soft laugh. "You're being dramatic." "Maybe, but I'm being honest." She walked away from the conversation the same way she always did, deciding it was over without actually resolving anything. That night, lying in bed with the quiet pressing in, I opened my phone and scrolled to a message thread I hadn't touched in months. Lena, a former coworker from my last role, smart, funny, too perceptive. She'd always lingered a second too long when we talked, always found excuses to message. I'd kept my replies short, polite, eventually stopped responding altogether. Out of habit, out of loyalty. I typed back a simple response to her last message. "Hey, sorry I disappeared. Have you been?" She replied almost immediately. We talked for a bit. Work, life, nothing flirtatious, nothing inappropriate, just present. She asked questions. She listened. She didn't make me feel like I was asking for too much by wanting to be heard. The shift was immediate. Within a day, my wife noticed when my phone lit up, noticed when I smiled at something I was reading, noticed when I set it face down on the table. Suddenly, tone mattered. "Who are you texting?" she asked one evening, trying and failing to sound casual. "Just friends," I said. Her eyes lingered longer than necessary. She didn't like that answer. When Lena asked if I wanted to grab a drink that Friday, I didn't hesitate. I didn't announce it. I didn't ask permission. I mentioned it the same way my wife mentioned Mark, casually, like it was nothing. "I'm going out for a drink after work," I said, grabbing my jacket. "With who?" she asked too quickly. "Lena, a friend." "From work?" "Former work." She nodded once, sharp, controlled. "Have fun." She barely spoke to me before I left. When I came home later that night, the lights were on in the bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed, eyes red, like she'd been crying or holding back from it. "This is different," she said as soon as I stepped inside. I set my keys down. "That's what you keep saying." "Because it is," she snapped. "You're doing this to hurt me." I shook my head. "I'm doing exactly what you've been doing for months." "That's not the same." "You still haven't explained how." The argument spiraled from there, voices raised, accusations thrown. By the end of the weekend, it wasn't just between us anymore. Her sister called me petty, said I was playing games instead of being a husband. Her friends weighed in, framing it as me punishing her instead of communicating. Her parents suggested counseling, not for us, for me, with the unspoken assumption that I was the problem that needed fixing. Mark, meanwhile, was still around. Still texting, still meeting her for walks, still somehow exempt from every rule I was expected to follow. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about boundaries at all. It was about control, and who was allowed to have it. 3 weeks later, the truth stopped hiding. Not because I went looking for it, not because I checked her phone or followed her or did anything I'd always told myself I would never do. It came to me, uninvited. Her tablet was sitting on the kitchen counter when I came home from work, screen lit, unlocked, a message thread open like a confession left on the altar. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. My brain tried to protect me, to frame it as something harmless, work-related, a joke taken out of context. Then the details started to land. Hotel confirmations, not screenshots, actual bookings, dates that lined up perfectly with the retreats she'd mentioned offhand. Inside jokes that only exist when two people are sharing more than conversation. Photos cropped carefully, strategically, and then others that weren't cropped at all. Skin, familiar shapes, intimacy that no longer belonged to me. My chest tightened. My hands started to shake so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. I felt cold and hot at the same time. My ears rang. For a moment I thought I might be sick. Shock came first, pure disbelief. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be her. Then came anger, sharp and sudden. Then humiliation. Then something quieter and heavier. Grief. Not just for the marriage, but for the version of it I thought I'd been living in. I stood there longer than I realized, scrolling without really seeing, absorbing the scope of it. How long it had been going on, how casual it all looked, how comfortable. My emotions cycled faster than I could name them. Rage, sadness, confusion, a brief, humiliating flicker of self-blame. If I'd said something differently, if I'd pushed harder, if I'd let it go sooner. Then something shifted. The panic faded, replaced by clarity. Not peace, clarity. I locked the tablet and set it back exactly where I found it. No confrontation, no explosion, no dramatic accusation she could later twist into a story about me losing control. I went into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until my breathing evened out. That's when my instincts, the ones I rely on at work when things start falling apart, kicked in. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want apologies rehearsed after the fact. I didn't want tears that could be weaponized later. I wanted facts. So I didn't confront her right away. I hired a private investigator instead. Someone neutral, professional, someone who didn't care about feelings or narratives or who looked like the villain. Just timelines, locations, proof. Because I knew something else then too. If I confronted her without evidence, she'd deny it, minimize it, call it emotional, call it complicated, call me paranoid. Facts don't argue back. Facts don't get rewritten. And once I had them, I would never have to wonder again what was real and what was just another version of the story I was expected to accept. The mediation was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where every sound feels amplified. The scrape of a chair, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft shuffle of paper as lawyers pretended this was just another case. Her lawyer did most of the talking, calm, polished, sympathetic in tone without ever sounding apologetic. He spoke about misunderstandings, about emotional neglect, about how relationships drift when one partner becomes unavailable. He suggested that loneliness had blurred lines, that feelings had been confused. When the topic of Mark finally came up, he cleared his throat. There was nothing physical, he said carefully. At least not until recently. Recently. As if timing softened betrayal? I watched my wife as he spoke. She stared at the table, jaw tight, foot tapping beneath her chair. Not remorseful. Irritated, like this was an inconvenience she hadn't planned for. When her lawyer finished, there was a pause. He looked at me, expectant, Like this was the moment I was supposed to react emotionally, defensively, like I was supposed to argue. Instead, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Thick, organized, labeled. I slid it across the table. Dates, locations, screenshots, photographs taken from a distance but unmistakable. Gym parking lots late at night, hotel lobbies, elevators, check-in desks, receipts, timestamps. A weekend she'd told me was a wellness retreat, documented instead as 2 nights at a boutique hotel an hour outside the city. The room shifted. Her lawyer opened the folder, flipping slowly at first, then faster. His expression tightened. The practiced calm cracked just enough to notice. My wife glanced over, then reached for it herself. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She rolled her eyes. "This is excessive," she said flatly, pushing the folder back like it offended her. "You went through all this just to feel right?" I met her gaze, calm, steady. "No," I said. "I did it so I could be done." The mediator cleared his throat. Her lawyer stopped talking. For the first time since we'd sat down, no one had a script. That's when the fight really started. The divorce dragged on far longer than it needed to. Every concession I offered was met with another demand. Every attempt at efficiency turned into a battle of principle. She challenged timelines, questioned assets, disputed facts already proven. Her family backed her completely, paid for experts, encouraged delays, treated it like a war of attrition, like if they exhausted me enough, I'd give in. I didn't. I moved into a small apartment near work. 1 bedroom, bare walls, mismatched furniture I didn't care enough to replace. It wasn't home, but it was quiet, predictable. For the first time in months, no one questioned my reality. And that made all the difference. I ran into her once at a grocery store. Middle of the afternoon, frozen foods aisle. I was comparing prices on vegetables I didn't really care about when I felt it before I saw it. That shift in the air, the sense of being watched. She rolled her cart directly in front of mine and stopped. "So, you're really doing this?" she asked. Not angry, disbelieving, like I'd broken a rule she thought was permanent. "Yes." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're really walking away, just like that?" I nodded. "Yes." She glanced around, then back at me. "You're throwing everything away." "No," I said calmly. "I already lost it. I'm just acknowledging that." Her grip tightened on the cart handle. "You don't get to decide that on your own." "I already did." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Unbelievable. You act like you're the victim here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was coming from a woman who cheated on me and in all likelihood was still doing so. "I'm not acting like anything," I said. "I'm just done." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "So this is it? You don't even want to fight for us?" I met her eyes. "I fought. You just didn't notice because it didn't inconvenience you." People were starting to glance our way. She noticed too. "Fine," she snapped, yanking her cart aside. "Run away. That's what you're good at." I pushed past her without responding. In the parking lot, I heard my name. She was walking toward me again, faster now, anger stripped away and replaced with something raw. "You think this makes you strong, walking out instead of fixing things?" I unlocked my car. "I think staying when someone keeps crossing lines makes you disappear." She scoffed. "You're exaggerating." "I hired a professional because I stopped trusting my own perception," I said. "That's not exaggeration." She froze. "You didn't have to humiliate me," she said quietly. "I didn't. Your choices did." Her eyes filled, finally, but the tears didn't move me the way they once would have. "This isn't over," she said. "It is for me." I got into my car and drove away. A week later, I ran into her sister at a cafe near my apartment. She didn't sit down, just hovered at my table like a messenger. "She's not okay. You could at least check on her." "I'm not her husband anymore." "You don't stop caring overnight." I didn't. I stopped being responsible for fixing what I didn't break. Her sister shook her head. "You're being cold." "I'm being consistent." Another time it was a mutual friend at the gym. He cornered me by the lockers. "She says you blindsided her." I asked for boundaries. She refused. I asked for honesty. She lied. That's her side, and the evidence is mine. That ended the conversation. Each confrontation followed the same pattern: shock that I hadn't softened, irritation that I wouldn't absorb blame, disbelief that I meant what I said. They expected anger, bargaining, guilt. What they got was resolve. And that, more than anything, seemed to unsettle them. Because once I acknowledged the loss, there was nothing left for them to take from me. 3 months after the papers were signed, I heard Mark had moved out of her place. It came to me casually, the way these things often do, through someone who didn't realize the weight of what they were carrying. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it over drinks, lowering their voice like it was gossip instead of consequence. 2 months later, I heard why. The whispers had started to follow them. Studios quietly stopped booking her. Retreat invitations dried up. Clients asked uncomfortable questions. His reputation took a hit too. People talk when timelines don't add up, when marriages end and new relationships appear a little too fast. Their affair, once thrilling in secrecy, didn't survive daylight. That's when the calls started. At first, I ignored them. Missed calls, long voicemails I didn't listen to, then texts, short ones at first, "Can we talk?" Then longer, spiraling messages filled with regret and revisionist history. When that didn't work, mutual friends reached out, carefully worded check-ins, invitations disguised as concern. "She's not doing well. She just wants closure. She's really changed." Then she showed up. At my office once, standing across the street like she wasn't sure she belonged anywhere near my life anymore. Security handled that before I had to. At my apartment another time, knocked softly, waited too long, left without a scene. I didn't feel satisfaction, just confirmation. Eventually, I agreed to coffee. Neutral ground, public, one conversation, final. She was already there when I arrived, sitting near the window with both hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, something else. Like the certainty she used to carry had drained out of her, quieter. "I made the worst mistake of my life," she said after a long pause. "I know," I said. She flinched slightly, like she'd hoped for denial or reassurance. "I didn't think it would go like this. I don't know, I thought it was just a phase." "I know," I said again. She swallowed. "I thought you'd always be there." That was the mistake. Her eyes filled then, properly this time. Tears slipped down unchecked. "I see that now," she whispered. She reached across the table, tentative like she wasn't sure she still had permission. Her fingers hovered near mine. I didn't move. "This isn't punishment," I said gently. "It's consequence." She covered her face and cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly breaking in on herself. I stayed calm, not because I was cold, but because I was finished. When I stood to leave, she looked up, searching my face one last time, like she might find a version of me that still belonged to her. She didn't. Outside, the air felt lighter, cleaner, like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it. Some endings don't need drama, just honesty and the courage to walk away once you finally have it. I heard through mutual friends that she moved in with her sister. It wasn't framed as temporary, not a getting back on her feet situation, just where she landed when the version of her life she'd imagined collapsed under its own weight. The yoga studios stopped calling. The retreats didn't invite her back. Wellness, it turns out, doesn't pair well with public scandals. She took a lower-paying job as a call center representative. Fixed hours, scripted conversations, a headset instead of a mat. A far cry from the flexible, curated life she used to talk about with so much certainty. Mark had moved on too. Apparently, they hadn't ended quietly. The excitement that once justified everything faded fast once consequences arrived. They fought, a lot. About money, about blame, about whose reputation had taken the bigger hit. Each accused the other of ruining things. When the fantasy of picking up their college romance where it left off shattered, they didn't have much left. No shared values, no patience, no foundation strong enough to survive reality. They could barely stand each other. I didn't feel vindicated hearing any of this. Just distant, like it belonged to a life I'd already stepped out of. As for me, I'm doing okay. Work is steady. I've been given more responsibility, projects that require trust, decision-making, follow-through, the kind of things I'm good at, the kind that remind me I didn't imagine my own reliability. I'm dating casually. Coffee, dinners, conversations without expectation. I don't overshare. I don't promise anything I'm not ready to give. Some connections fade, a few linger. That's fine. I'm also seeing a therapist, not because I'm broken, but because I don't want to carry unexamined weight into whatever comes next. Trust will take time, I know that. I don't rush it, I don't force optimism. I let it rebuild slowly, on its own terms. Some nights are quieter than others. Some weekends feel empty. But I've learned something important. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Sometimes it's just space. Space to heal, to recalibrate, to remember who you are when no one is asking you to compromise your boundaries for their comfort. And for now, that's enough. Thanks for listening to our story. It's wonderful to have you here. Please like and subscribe to have more content come your way, and do check out the other stories from our channel.